everybody, and welcome back to the Babe Bolts channel. As always, my name is Jake Ricker, alongside my co-host Michael Wax. Michael, we got a different kind of video for everybody today. I'm really excited to get into. We're going to be taking a look at who we think are the top 5 all-time players for the Tampa Bay Lightning in franchise history. Super excited to get into it. Michael, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. There's going to be a lot of debate. I don't think we have the same players on the list. I don't even think for some of the players we have them in the same positions. You know what? Maybe we do. It's all a part of the conversation. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have been around for more than 25 years now. So the top 5 and top 10 really stretch out in terms of the value that each person has brought to the team. If you were to do this maybe in 2004 when they first won the Stanley Cup, or even 2010, I don't think you could have as extensive of a list. But now that we're already in the 2020 decade, this list could change, but this list is already just so talented in terms of its roster construction.
I think that list has already changed as well, just from when we won our first cup to now. But we'll get into that a little bit more as the video goes on. And be sure to let us know down in the comments who your top 5 players are of all time for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let us know if you agree with our list. If you think we're crazy, let us know if you think we missed anybody. Would love to hear any and all thoughts. But to get started, Michael, let's go with our number 5 spot, the 5th best Lightning player of all time. Michael, who do you have?
I have the best Tampa Bay Lightning goaltender in history, which is Andre Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky is a dynamo. When you look at him playing right now, he's someone, and there are others on this list that are not only on the top 5, but are carving out their legacy today. They're continuing to cement themselves as possibly even a top 3 candidate, or maybe even the top spot on the list. But Vasilevsky is one of those guys that can continue making sure that he is the top in the top 5. A record of 177, 76, and 19 in the regular season with a 920 save percentage and a 2.50 goals against average, which are actually the record is first in the NHL, or the record is first in Tampa Bay Lightning history. The save percentage and goals against average were actually second to Ben Bishop, but Vasilevsky has played far more games than Bishop ever did. 55, 33, and 22 record with a 918 save percentage and a 2.37 goals against average in 58 playoff games, a 3-time All-Star, 1-time Vezina winner, 2-time NHL wins leader, did tie 1 year with Connor Hellebuck, but he held it by himself in the other year, a 1-time Stanley Cup champion. He is the franchise leader in games played, wins, saves, and shutouts. Andre Vasilevsky by far is the best Lightning goaltender in NHL history. Is the best Lightning goaltender in history, and is my number 5.
I agree with that 100%. I think Vasilevsky is definitely a top 5 player for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's been so good, and I think it's only a matter of time before he owns almost every single record there is for goaltenders. He doesn't quite own all of them. Ben Bishop actually owns a few as well, which I'm sure we might get into him a little bit later. But Bassey is definitely one of the Lightning for a long time, in the beginning of this franchise, never had that franchise goaltender. They did get one in Nikolai Hobby-Bulin, but then Bassey, I think, was really this second true franchise goaltender the Lightning have had. He's been the guy they've never had to even worry about drafting goaltender for a long while now, because he has been that good. He is just one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. Michael, at number 5, I don't have Andre Vasilevsky, but I have Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman is by far the best defenseman in Lightning history, as he just recently hit 500 career points. He already has the most defensemen of all time for the Tampa Bay Lightning. When you look at that 500 career points too, it puts him on pace to be up there in the most points of a defenseman all time in the NHL. Now, granted, he's going to have to play into his 40s in order to break that kind of record. But if he were to play the same amount of seasons of guys like Paul Coffey, for example, he actually could get there. That's how many points he puts up as a defenseman, and that's not normal. But what makes Victor Hedman so special to me is, well, one, he was drafted as a Bolt as well, which I think is super important when you look at the top 5 Lightning players of all time. He's stuck around right here in Tampa Bay. He loves this city. But just the defensive plays that he he's able to make. Those are things that often don't show up on score sheets. You don't see those on record books and stuff like that. But he's able to make so many good defensive plays and just lock down the opposition. It almost goes unnoticed sometimes. The other thing that really makes Victor Hedman, I think, a special defenseman is he's able to make any player he plays with better around him. You know, for example, I'll make an analogy to football. You look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. Those guys are able to make the players that play around them better. That's exactly what Victor Hedman does, I think. And the Lightning have really never had a defenseman like that before. So I think Victor Hedman is clearly the best defenseman in Lightning history, and he sits at number 5 for my list.
So Victor Hedman is an absolute unicorn. I'll get to him later because he's in my top five as well. One of the things I'll say about Victor Hedman is you brought up the fact that he was drafted here and he's wanted to stay here. I think that's a testament to the organization, and I think that is a sign of the way that Victor Hedman is as a person. Because as we know, the Stamkos saga for his contract kind of dragged out. It went till a couple of days before free agency, and then he re-signed. Victor Hedman, as soon as July 1st hit, and he had a year left to negotiate his contract, right there. He just re-signed,
That's
said, I
right.
didn't want to have to deal with it. I love Tampa. He said that he had been here in America, in Tampa, since he was 18. This was the team that drafted him, and he didn't want to leave. And I think that's what makes Victor Hedman so special when it comes to the Tampa Bay Lightning fan base and the way that he is just revered around the NHL. But going to number 4, Jake, I'm going to be honest, I had this guy at number 1 for a really long time. And then I thought about it a little bit more. You know, there are a lot of people on the current day roster that are comparable to this guy if you look at how they would fare if they played the same amount of games as him, because he did play the most amount of games in Lightning history. I'm talking about Vinny Lecavalier. Have him at my number 4 spot. Uh, as a player, unbelievable. You know, 383 goals, 491 assists for 874 points in 1,037 games in a Lightning uniform. Also 52 points in 30 or 63 playoff games, a 4-time All-Star, a one-time Rocket Richard winner when he scored 50 goals in 2007, won the King Clancy Award, won the Stanley Cup back in 2004 with a nasty assist on that game-winning goal for Ruslan Fedotenko. He's the only player in Lightning history to play 1,000 games, and even off the ice, one of the most generous players probably in NHL history. He's right up there with guys like PK Subban. Donated an entire wing to the St. Joe's Memorial Hospital, was a part of the Cut for the Cure, where they would shave their heads for many, many years. One of my favorite players growing up, and I was very fortunate to be able to meet Vinny Lecavalier at one of the Cut for the Cure events. So Vinny Lecavalier holds a special place in my heart, probably is number 1, but on the top 5 list, when you look at his on ice production, he did slow down after the '07 season when he got hit illegally and kind of never recovered. Did play very well for the remainder of his stretch, but not to the elite potential. And for that, I do have to bump him down a couple of slots. He is number 4.
I'm surprised actually that you have him that low. I thought he'd be a little bit higher on your list. He is on my list as well. We'll get to him later, but yeah, Vinny is such a special player. You mentioned all the things he did, especially off the ice as well. You know, that's so important for him. He's another guy that was drafted by Tampa Bay in the first round and stuck with it for a long, long time in Tampa Bay. It was really unfortunate when we had to let him go and we moved on and he went to Los Angeles and Philadelphia. He really never did anything there. It's one thing I wish he could have retired as a Bolt and been the only team he played for. But Finney is absolutely one of the best players of all time in Lightning history. You know, I'll stop there because I'll get to him a little bit later when he jumps on my list. But at number 4, Michael, I have who you had at number 5 in Andre Vasilevsky. This is a spot again, as you mentioned, Vasilevsky just so good. He holds so many Lightning records. He's got so many shutouts. He's just able to put the team on his back when he needs to and win games. And what I think is also really amazing about Vasilevsky is his mentality that he has. When you see him lose games, he gets extremely frustrated and is not happy, and he turns around and plays his best hockey after he loses. So it's really impressive how he's able to do that. Now, if you would have asked me the top 5 list a couple years ago, I wouldn't have had Andre Vasilevsky on the list because he was still relatively young and new to the team. The person I would have had on here is Nikolai Hobby-Bulin, because Nikolai Hobby-Bulin for a long time was the first and only franchise goaltender the Lightning have ever had. And Nikolai Hobby-Bulin is one of my favorite players of all time. He's half the reason I wear number 60 on my jerseys. But Andre Vasilevsky continues to break so many records for the Lightning, and he's just clearly become one of the best players of all time. And he makes such a huge impact on this team, which is why I have him above a guy like Victor Hedman.
Yeah, and I look at Vasilevsky. I remember one game in particular where the Lightning were actually winning 6-2 with like a minute to go, and Vasilevsky allowed a goal, and his first instinct was to get mad at himself and smash his stick. That's the type of competitor he is. We don't think of him as a very aggressive guy. He's not. He's one of the most soft-spoken guys on the team, but he is extremely competitive. I think it helps that he is friends with other guys on the team like Kucherov, and he is being mentored by Stamkos, by someone like Victor Hedman. Those guys have really helped him mature into the greatest Lightning goalie of all time. As far as my number three goes, I have someone that you had at number five. And speaking of Victor Hedman, he is my number three all time. I know yesterday in our recap, I said he could potentially be the greatest Lightning player of all time. That might have been a bit of a stretch, but I also think that he is rising in the ranks because, as you mentioned, not only does he put up the points with 500 points in 790 regular season games and 70 points in 109 playoff games, he is one of the best defensemen in the NHL. You can look at a guy like Drew Doughty for a couple of years or Brett Burns. Those guys put up the points all the time. Their defensive game left a lot to be desired. Victor Hedman is consensus one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL, a four-time Norris Trophy finalist, which I know doesn't always signify defensive excellence, but he did win the trophy one time. He's a four-time All-Star, one-time Stanley Cup champion. Let's not forget a Conn Smythe Trophy winner. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he put up 10 goals in the playoffs, but that's still very impressive for him. And he is, as you mentioned earlier, the franchise leader for points by a defenseman with the big 500. So Victor Hedman, I always thought he was underappreciated, not only league wide, but by Lightning fans. I think that even with the recognition that he's getting now, he's still vastly underestimated by both Lightning fans and the rest of the NHL. I'm very, very stoked that he's going to be here for a long time, that he gets to mentor kids like Mikhail Sergachev, Eric Chernak, and Cal Foote, and possibly others when they rise through the pipeline. And he is my number three.
He's an awesome, awesome defenseman. So glad to have him locked up for sure. Michael, at number three, I have a new player that we haven't mentioned yet, and this is the current captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that is number 91, Steven Stamkos. Stamkos has been an absolute legend when it comes to Tampa Bay, especially in this era right now. He's been one of the longest standing captains in Lightning franchise history. I believe he's actually tied with Vinny right now, but he'll break that record very, very soon. So he's been the captain for the Lightning for an extremely long time. He's a great leader both on and off the ice. Steven Stamkos is at number three for me. He holds a ton of records as well in the record book. He's actually behind Marty and Vinny a lot in the record books, but he's still playing right now, so he could very easily start to catch up in some of those records. I believe he's starting to creep up on the points record as well, which Marty currently holds. That's something he could break very well. So if you ask me a couple years later, Michael, Steven Stamkos might be even higher on my list.
Yeah, and we'll get to him eventually on my list too. One of the better players in Lightning history, and I think that when he was drafted back in 2008, not necessarily in Tampa, because at the time the Lightning weren't necessarily the talk of the town. The Rays had just gone to the World Series, the Buccaneers had just gone to the playoffs, but a lot of people were saying that Steven Stamkos was the franchise savior. And, we'll get to that when we get to Steven Stamkos on my list. But as far as number two goes, I'm actually going to go with Marty St. Louis. I know a lot of people would have him at number one. He is one of the franchise icons with almost 1,000 games played in a Lightning uniform, 972 games played in a Lightning uniform with 953 points. Point per game playoff producer, which is something that you don't normally see, especially in a Lightning uniform with 68 points in 63 games. He's a Hall of Famer. He's the only Hall of Famer to play the majority of his career in a Tampa Bay Lightning uniform. Six-time All-Star, three-time Lady Byng winner, two-time Art Ross Trophy winner, a one-time Hart Trophy winner, a Stanley Cup champion, and he currently has the record in the franchise for assists, points, shorthanded goals, and game winning goals. I know his tenure ended a little bit sour when he got traded, but in terms of someone that made an instant impact from the moment he stepped on the ice for the Lightning to the moment he left, Marty St. Louis, easily one of the best players in Lightning history. I have him at number two.
Well, Michael, for the first time on this list, I'm going to agree with you. I also have Marty St. Louis at number two on my list. He is an absolute legend for the Lightning. And you mentioned, there was a bummer that he got traded at the end of his tenure with the Lightning, and also he was with Calgary to start things off. But when you think of Marty St. Louis, you think of him as a Bolt. There's no question about that, even if it was a little bit of a sour ending for him in his time in Tampa Bay. You mentioned all of the records he currently holds. Marty, who was a player that many people wrote off and said was too small, too slow, he totally proved them wrong quickly. When he came to the Tampa Bay Lightning, he was a huge part of their Stanley Cup win. I mean, he had how many huge game winning goals did he have, especially in that playoff run, specifically the one to send it to game seven, to send the Stanley Cup back to Tampa? I mean, that is a goal no Tampa fan will ever forget. And that was all due to him. He was so good with his speed and getting to pucks. Marty was just he by far one of the best Lightning players of all time, and definitely I think a lot of people will have him at number one. It's definitely close, but Marty just a great player overall, and he was one of my favorite things about Marty. Is the last thing I'll mention is that he was always very easy to find on the ice because he always loved to use that yellow stick. You never could miss Marty. He was an awesome player, and he was just one of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Marty St. Louis, definitely one of the best Lightning players in history. We want to do our honorable mentions before we head over to our number one overall Lightning players in history. So, not in any particular order. I want to talk about these, make it very quick. But Nikita Kucherov, he's going to make it very soon if he continues on this pace. I know he's not playing this season, at least in the regular season, but he will make it very soon. Ben Bishop, I know you said that Nikolai Habibulin was the only franchise goalie. I disagree. I think Ben Bishop was that guy for a couple of seasons. He was that guy that really gave the Lightning that extra push to try to bring them to the conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals in the mid 2010s. Dan Boyle, the first great Lightning defenseman in history. Some people say Roman Hammerlick. I disagree. Dan Boyle, one of the best trades in Lightning history, getting him from the Florida Panthers, one of the best Lightning players in history. Brad Richards, 2003 2004 Conn Smythe winner, one of the most solid point producers in Lightning history. And he often goes overlooked when you talk about Vinny, Marty, Stamkos, and Kucherov. Vinny Prospel, another guy that often goes overlooked, specifically because he left during the Cup season. He got traded, and then he came back. So he was gone for that one season, and that one season they won the Stanley Cup. But a very, very solid point producer. And Pablo Kubina, another guy that had multiple stints with the Lightning, a solid right-handed guy, dependable on defense. He really, I think, was the answer to who is going to mentor Victor Hedman, especially on the defensive side, because Kubina was there while Victor Hedman was drafted and was developing, which I think was perfect for him because a lot of Victor Hedman's game defensively molds after Kubina's game. And it's very obvious if you look at it. But as far as honorable mentions go, I know I had more than actually five, but those are the guys that I think have a tremendous impact on the Lightning organization.
I agree with just every single one of those. You're absolutely right. When it comes to Ben Bishop, he was one of my favorite goaltenders when he was here with the Lightning. And the only reason I didn't call him a real franchise goaltender is because I just felt that his time with the Lightning was short. If it wasn't for Andrei Vasilevsky, Bishop might have almost all of the records when it comes to goaltenders. But Vasilevsky ended up coming up and being such a good goaltender that he kind of just took over, and we didn't have this need for Bishop anymore. But you're absolutely right. He was definitely one of the few franchise goalies the Lightning have ever had. You mentioned Pavel Kubina. He was one of my favorite defensemen growing up. He was so good for the Lightning. Brad Richards as well in his multiple years here. So I agree just about every single one of those honorable mentions. And another one that I will mention that I think is a lot longer away than some of the guys like Nikita Kucherov, for example, but I think could definitely be on this list. Maybe 6, 7, 10 years down the road. He's Braden Point. He's shown that he has been so good just in his few years that we've seen him. But the seems like the limit is the sky for Braden Point. He's been a kid that has dedication and heart like no other Lightning player I think ever has. So I think he is definitely someone to keep an eye on that could eventually make the list, but he's still got a long ways to go because he's still relatively new. But Michael, let's get into it. Your number one player of all time. Who do you have?
Well, before we get into that, I wanted to mention, you brought up Braden Point. I think there are a couple other guys on this current roster that could not necessarily make it in the top five, but definitely into the top 10 or the top 15. You got players like Andre Palat. We made a video about him. Hopefully, Jake, you'll put that in the top right corner about how he is a vital piece to the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. If Tyler Johnson stays, I don't think he will, but if Tyler Johnson stays and continues to produce, he could possibly be in that top 10. And Mikhail Sergachev. Like, Mikhail Sergachev is only 22. He's done a lot already, guys. He's
True.
just a dynamo. So, but as we get into the top one, I'd like to introduce you to someone that you had late on your list and a name that a lot of people would say is missing on mine and maybe shouldn't be number one, Steven Stamkos. I think that he has passed Martin St. Louis. I think he has passed Vinny Lecavalier as the best Lightning player in history. The only player among those three, and besides Nikita Kucherov, who again is probably almost there but needs a couple of more seasons. Stamkos and Kucherov are the only players in Lightning history to have more than 500 points and to be over a point per game in a Lightning uniform. Stamkos with 436 goals, 423 assists, 859 points in 829 games. A lot of that has to do with injury. I think he would have put 1,000 points up by now. I think he would have put up 1,000 games by now. But you have to go with the cards that are dealt. And with that, Steven Stamkos has excelled. He's a decent playoff performer. I think that's one thing that really separates him from opposed to Marty and Vinny and everybody else. Only 54 points in 71 playoff games, although he did have that great 247 moment in game 3 of the 2020 Stanley Cup Finals. A 6-time All Star, that's the most in Lightning history. A 2-time Rocket Richard winner, a 1-time Stanley Cup champion. The last player in NHL history to score 60 goals back in the 2011-2012 season. The franchise leader in goals, power play goals, hat tricks, and shooting percentage, actually. He's 1.1 points above Braden Point in shooting percentage, which I thought was very interesting, passing it from the present to the future. And the thing with me that separates him from Marty and Vinny, I look at Marty and Vinny as a tandem. Those guys brought the Lightning up from the doldrums of just the worst the Lightning had to offer in the late 90s. Ever since Stamkos has arrived, and in the late 2000s, the Lightning had a lot of issues. He has changed the franchise extensively. New owner has been brought in since he's come in. They've renovated the stadium. They renovated the Tampa Bay area around Channelside for Steven Stamkos. And he's been the vocal guy when it comes to the team. He's been the leader for that entire time. And I think that speaks volumes as to the team is improving as Stamkos is maturing. He's really been that guy that the Lightning have needed for their history, and the Lightning are now a permanent fixture, and that's why I think Steven Stamkos is number one in the Tampa Bay Lightning franchise players.
You bring up a really good point there when you mentioned that Vinny and Marty were the duo in town when they were running this franchise and won the first Stanley Cup for us. And Steven Stamkos, while he did play with Vinny and Marty as well in his earlier days, he really didn't have that player for a long time. Nikita Kucherov could arguably be that player for Stamkos now, but you're right. This franchise really moved to the next level as Stamkos came up and being. For me, I think Stamkos will eventually be up there as the number one player of all time. I think he just needs a couple more years, mostly due to injury. He's only about just under 100 points away from breaking the all-time points record, which is currently held by Marty again. So he's 31 years right now. Couple more seasons, he can probably do that. I mean, if you have a really good season, you could do it in one season, but I don't know if he'll have another 100-point season anytime soon. But he's close, is the point I'm saying. And but you're right. Steven Stamkos is a legend for the Tampa Bay Lightning. No doubt his number is going to the rafters by the time he retires. No question about that. And hopefully he's able to break some of those 1,000-point and maybe the 1,000 games record. Love to see him be on that list as well. All right. So for my number one, if you haven't figured it out already, is Vincent Lecavier, excuse me. Vinny is a legendary Lightning player for me. I think there's no question about it that he's the number one as of right now. What I think put Vinny over the top for me instead of a guy like Marty, who many people would have had at number one, he's just his, as you kind of mentioned, his dedication to this team and outside. And we talked about how Stamkos has also helped revolutionize the Tampa area. Vinny has done that as well. With all his involvement with the hospitals and the charity work that he does, Vinny was just an absolute, such a big part of the Tampa Bay area. He also had so many big moments in games as well. I remember going to a game as a kid with my dad, and I remember Vinny had a penalty shot. And I looked at my dad and I said, watch, Vinny's going to score right here on this penalty shot. And sure enough, he went right down the ice and he put the puck in the back of the net. One of my favorite memories of Vinny right there. And obviously, he was a huge part as he led the team, helped lead the team to their first ever Stanley Cup. Very inspirational, very big part of this Lightning franchise. He doesn't hold as many records as guys like Stamkos and Marty does, but he's right there with all those guys too in those records. He's usually second or third for all of those. So I think Vinny, and just because of the time he spent with the Lightning and what he did off the ice as well as on the ice, is what puts him at number one for me. He was a legendary player for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I would have put him at number one if this was done even 6 months ago, or before the Lightning had won their second Stanley Cup, because personally he means a lot to me. But I had to look at it as well. There have been some guys that have helped win the Lightning another Stanley Cup and really revitalize the Tampa Bay area around Channelside. And when you look at it raw statistically, Marty St. Louis was the better producer. So I think that has a lot to do with that as well. But as we've said on countless episodes before, we love all these guys. We want all these guys to be successful, whether they've retired or whether they are still playing. We want Tampa to be able to continue the success that they've had on their hockey market, which is one of the most important parts of the Tampa economy right now is the way that the Lightning are doing. And it's so great to see fans back at Amalie Arena, to be able to see legendary players like Stamkos and Hedman. And hopefully they continue their legacies in a Lightning uniform for a decade to come, maybe. And they leave it off for other guys like Point and Kucherov and Sergachev. But again, that remains to be seen because we are in the midst of a change, I think, when it comes to the present and the future of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Michael, you mentioned the Stanley Cups there. I think that's something that's also going to boost a lot of these guys like Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos way up this list. Is that if they're able to win a second, maybe even third, who knows, Stanley Cup, they would be the only players in Lightning history to do so. No Lightning player has ever done that, won two cups with this franchise. So that would be something that no one ever done before and could easily push them higher up the list. Also, real quick before we wrap things up, I want to mention some player that you know, one of my favorite players. He's the other half of the reason I wear number 60, and would have been on this list, but he just didn't play long enough with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He only had a short career here, and that's Dave Andreychuk. I think he's absolutely deserving, though. I forgot to mention him in the honorable mentions. I think he deserves a shout out because Dave Andreychuk was the captain of the team, and it was for a lot of people that missing piece for the Lightning, and was finally able to push them over the edge to get them to the Stanley Cup Finals and win their Stanley Cup. You know, no, he wasn't the greatest on ice performer because towards the end of his career when he came down here in Tampa Bay, but the leadership role he brought to Tampa, I think, is unmatched. I mean, heck, he's the only player to have a statue outside Amalie Arena right now. So take that for what it's worth as well. But Dave Andreychuk is another guy that I think is one of the best players of all time for the Tampa Bay Lightning because of what he did for this franchise to get them their first Stanley Cup.
Absolutely. Dave Vandertruck, one of the most important pieces in Lightning history. There are a lot of guys that you could say that are like Andreychuk in their leadership style, but at the end of the day, when you watch that Stanley Cup video, who's wearing the C? It's Dave Andreychuk. So he is probably one of the most important Lightning players in history. Not necessarily one of the best in terms of production, as you said, but you know, love Dave Andreychuk. He is part of Lightning lore forever.
Michael, anything else to add before we wrap up this video?
No, I like I said, I really think that it's very important for this to continue when it comes to Stamkos and Hedman and Vasilevsky and Kucherov and so many of the talent pieces that we have in Lightning right now to continue the way that they're going. And I don't want to say eventually that Marty and Vinny are going to get knocked off this list, but I think that if they continue with the paces that they're on, you could very well see Marty and Vinny slip to number 4, number 5, uh, or you could entirely see them slip off the list because of there have been other very important pieces in Tampa Bay Lightning history, and that's not a diss against Vinny and Marty, but that just shows you that the current roster has so many players that could potentially make it into the top 5 that it's just we're so fortunate right now as Lightning fans to be able to watch what we are right now and have been able to grow up in the Vinny and Marty era.
Well, and Michael, as the saying goes, records are meant to be broken. So only records being broken means we're doing something right. Obviously, those players will always have a special place in Lightning history as the first to ever get those kinds of numbers and the first to ever win a Stanley Cup. But that's going to do it for us, guys, in today's video. Don't forget to leave a comment down below letting us know who your top 5 Lightning players of all time, whether you agree with our players, if there's somebody that we missed in this video, let us know down below. Any and all comments are always appreciated. But with that said, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you don't miss out on future videos just like this one. And remember, your Tampa Bay Lightning are your defending Stanley Cup champions.
Go Bolts.